reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus, but the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So to them Jesus addressed this parable. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off for a distant country, where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast. Because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound.' He became angry. And when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come back to life again. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you. So the question that I invite you to reflect on this week and to ponder is, how are we prodigal? How are we prodigal? How are you prodigal? And I'm going to break open that word in a minute, because we are all called to become the prodigal father in our gospel reading today. The parable is known as the parable of the prodigal son, but all three characters in our gospel reading today, each one is prodigal. But we're called, we may identify with the younger son, or we may identify with the older son, but we're all called to become the prodigal father. And this is how we can begin to understand what the word prodigal means. It comes from our second reading today, where St. Paul says, you have been entrusted. You have been entrusted with the message of reconciliation. You have been entrusted with the message of reconciliation. So last Monday was a first-time experience for me, and I was in court. I found myself in court with my family. There were 25 of us that were gathered, and I don't know what it's officially called, but it was, I'm just going to call it, it was an adoption ceremony. So my niece, Jennifer, adopted her third child. And so we were all there to welcome Evan into our family, and the celebration began. It began because she was lost, and now she has a home. And she was dead in the system, but now she is alive. She has a home, and has the last name of Zimmerman, because my niece, Jennifer, married Matt Zimmerman. And so they have 3 adopted children, just as part of the family. And it was really a very emotional experience. And in many ways, my older brother Larry, and my sister-in-law Debbie, they got the whole thing moving a number of years ago. They had their 3 children of their own, and then they decided they wanted to be foster parents. And so they would take in children until a home was found for them, and they swore that they would never, never say never, as they say, they would never adopt. They were merely going to be foster parents. Well, then Van entered into their life. And Van has muscular dystrophy. And Van would just be simply today, he is 12 years old, his life is in a wheelchair, his body is deteriorating, and if he were not adopted, he would be staring out a window someplace. And so Van has the last name Raymakers, adopted. He was lost, but has been found. He has a home. Larry and Debbie embody what St. Paul says today. You have been entrusted with the message of reconciliation. Larry and Debbie are prodigal. They're prodigal in opening up their home. They're prodigal in adopting 2 children, because Van had to have a sister, so they adopted Jane. So my brother's almost 70 years old, and he's got a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old. He's raising them. He's prodigal. He's generous. He's extravagant. He's giving his life, along with Debbie, to children who have really no place to lay their heads. And they're loved, and they have a home. And Larry and Debbie, along with Jennifer and Matt, have carried on the message of reconciliation. That is what it means to be prodigal. Let's take a look at the word. The word prodigal, I came up with 3 meanings. You know, usually we think when we hear the word prodigal, we usually think of, well, the prodigal son, who really messed things up. Huh? We think of someone who is lost. But let's take a look at the word. Wastefully extravagant. Yielding lavishly. Abundant. That our God is amazing grace. Taste and see how good the Lord is. In our first reading today, God has accompanied the Israelites for 40 years in the desert land, and because of his extravagance and his abundance, He has established a relationship with his people, and for 40 years in the desert, he has fed them manna, food that has sustained them. And now, because our God is so prodigal, so extravagant, that now they have occupied their homeland. And he no longer needs to provide manna for them, but now they can eat the produce of the land. And so Joshua and the people rejoice and they celebrate. So prodigal. How prodigal are we? And how are we prodigal? So the three characters in our gospel reading today. So all three characters are prodigal. The first one, the younger son, how is he prodigal? Well, he squanders everything. He loses everything. Okay? Over the top, he wastes his life. Okay, so he loses his inheritance, his honor as an Israelite, his dignity as a son, his religion because of his trade. He tends swine, and he loses the Sabbath because he can no longer worship with his people because he has compromised his faith by tending swine. And so, are we like the younger son? Are we wasting our life? You know, God created us for a purpose. God created each one of us for a mission. Have we discovered that mission? Have we discovered that purpose? Are we living for ourselves? Are we living for ourselves? Are we living lives by pursuing possessions and power and prestige and status and prestige and pleasure? How are we living our lives? Is it all about me? Am I prodigal in that way? Over the top? Am I wasting my life? Or am I like the older son? Am I prodigal in this way? Am I abundant with revenge? Like the son who stayed put and grew stone-hearted, resentful, bitter, unforgiving, not willing to welcome his brother home. So he was very prodigal in a very counterproductive way. And then we have the father. But let's look at the two sons just for a brief moment. And if we look at the first son, what impels him to come home? What impels him to come home? Not regret, not the desire to make amends, but his empty stomach. I can connect with that. And then what about the righteous? The older son, represents the righteous. Those who think they have their act together. And what about the righteous? Well, they too fly low. Their piety is attached to the good things of the Lord and not to the Lord of good things. So Jesus knows well the poor quality of our motives for conversion and repentance. But it doesn't matter. He loves us. And no one is good except God alone. And God loves us. And even if it's an imperfect contrition, God works with that. All we need to do is to turn to God. And God runs after us because God wants to be in a relationship with us. So, I love this parable. And so the Father is merciful. The parable illustrates the abundant mercy of God. And so he never stops waiting for his son to return home. I imagine the Father, on a daily basis, he respects his son's freedom. He respects his freedom. He knows his son is going to ruin his life, but he respects his freedom just as God respects our freedom. The Father respects our freedom. Even though his heart breaks as his son leaves, and even though he knows his son is going to mess things up, and he's going to squander, he lets his son go. every day I imagine the father going to the edge of the property line, and looking out at the horizon, looking for his son, and waiting for his son. And then when he sees his son, he runs out to his son. He runs. And that's the kind of God that we have. He runs towards us. He moves towards us. That our God will not rest, though he respects our freedom, will not rest until we come to our senses and return to him. And even if we come because our stomach is empty, that works for God, as long as we come. You know, last week in court there were 25 of us, but not everyone was there. Not everyone could be there. So, you know, even though it was a very emotional experience, we were still missing the other 25. Where were they? Okay? Many of them had to work and so on and so forth. Whenever we gather for Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, come together as a family and someone is missing, we know that. And all of us are like the Father. You know, we're kind of looking on the horizon. You know, our time together is somehow incomplete because not everybody is at the table. Not everybody is here. We understand why a nephew or a niece or a brother or sister cannot be there because of other obligations. Nonetheless, we miss them. And so you have the Father, you know, God the Father, who just longs and yearns for all of us to be here. And I see lots of empty seats. And at the beginning of the liturgy, I mean, our 10 o'clock Mass is down today. So I begin to think about, well, where are they? Now it's spring break, okay? And spring break can take 2 weekends, but hopefully we'll see many faces next Sunday. But somehow we're incomplete. The empty chairs tell us that not everyone is here. How prodigal, how generous, how extravagant are we? And then he puts on him the robe, which stands for honor, the ring, which stands for authority, and the sandals, which stand for freedom. And he welcomes his son home. Why? Because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. That is why. And then he begs the older son. He begs his older son to come in. Begs, like running towards his older, the eldest, and begs him to come in. Why? Because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. But when we reflect on the older son, he too left. He too went to a far-off country. In his heart, in his mind, he was distant. He was not connected with his brother, with his family. And so the father begs him to come home and to be with his brother. So, the question once again, how are we prodigal? How am I prodigal? And to take a look at, you know, where God may be calling me to be extravagant in love and mercy and kindness and outreach. And that is, I believe, the question of our gospel reading today. And as I landed, the Eucharist, the prodigal feast, the extravagant of our God, bread and wine becoming his body and blood. How blessed we are. And he sends us out to do the same and to make a difference in our world. Let us now stand and